Nerds, welcome to the Book Nerds Online Book Club. This session will be much more than just a book club session. It's a special one because we'll be paying tribute to a couple of legends who just passed away. And rest in peace, Irrfan Khan and Rishi Kapoor. We have picked up some books to be on the menu today. One of them is Saat Khoon Maaf, Susanna's Seven Husbands, which is again a book to movie adaptation. The second one will be talked about by Vidushi Nautiyal. Can you just show the book? Yeah, Life of Pi. The second one is Life of Pi. Even I have a copy. Again, a book to movie adaptation. And then we have the autobiography of Rishi Kapoor, which Priyakshi Goswami will be talking about, Khullam Khulla. And I was pretty fortunate, Mayank, to witness the book launch in at JLF. So it's quite a strange feeling, mixed feelings, talking about the book, especially due to the occurrences of the past 10-15 days. And we'll be talking a little bit about Macbeth and Maqbool, and the Rashme Sehgal will be talking about that. And of course, we have the one and only Mayank Shekhar with us, top movie critic. We at the Booknerds are huge fans. We have hosted him before for his maiden book, Name, Place, Animal Thing, which talked about everything, pop culture and everything about the Hindi film industry and much more. It was an interesting book to read, and we are still looking forward to another one from him. He's so busy at midday working his bum off, so he doesn't get time, I suppose. So, welcome, Mayank, to the session.
Thank you for having me, Rohan. This is amazing. I think the first event that I did with Name, Place, Animal Thing was with Book Nerds
Yeah,
in Dehradun.
yeah,
And it was a lovely experience. Great weather, of course, and
yeah,
amazing conversations. And I hope to continue with where we left off.
yeah.
I don't know if any of you were there that particular afternoon in Dehradun. If I'm not mistaken, it was at a cafe next to a school,
Why
St.
Cafe?
Joseph's Academy.
Yes, why Cafe?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What is it called again? Why
Why?
Cafe?
Why?
Why? Okay, the letter
Yeah,
Y.
yeah,
Right,
letter Y.
right. It
So
was an amazing place.
yeah, so great having you back again. And of course, there have been many changes during these times. Your hair has grown multifold, so that's one change. And of
Yeah.
course, we have been following you on YouTube and everywhere else. You have been doing some great sessions. But let me come to the topic for today. And what is the feeling like? You have interacted with these people, these legends, and they have contributed so much to the economics and entertainment and everything. They have been part of pop culture for a long time. What does it feel like?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Rohan. These two deaths, one that they took place back to back, or like one after the other, with absolutely a gap of 24 hours between the two. Of course, we also knew that both of them were ailing for almost around the same time, actually, almost 2 years. But and I've been a journalist for close to 2 decades now, Rohan. Uh, but and of course, reported a lot of deaths in those two decades, as you would imagine.
Yeah,
But this is the first time where there were two deaths of people who had reported on extensively, known very personally. Imagine them to be at the top of their game at the time when this happened,
yeah,
and they just disappeared. You know what
right,
I mean?
right,
I haven't written too many obituaries in my life because most of the people who passed away during the course of my career have been people who are much older, and it's only fair that you write obituaries of people that who you've known at a more personal basis, who you
yeah,
interacted with in a way that the
yeah,
regular reader gets to know something
yeah,
about their personalities. And
yeah,
I had to write two obituaries back to back,
yeah,
2,000 word plus. At the same time, deal with the basic grief that all of us at some level felt in a natural sort of way. Uh, and it just had to come out. It had to pour out in a way that's never happened to me as a journalist
yeah,
before. Of course, I thought about them at a personal level,
yeah,
as a personal level of loss only after those 2 days because I was too busy recounting as much as I could do of their life that I knew, of the time that I'd spent with them, of their work that we'd all become familiar with, but something more that you can sort of put together, frame into what is known as an obituary or a testimonial anyway.
yeah. I mean, let's talk about Irfan first. I mean, his loss is of a global sort of level because he, as you have mentioned in one of your interviews, or I was reading somewhere, that he was one of India's greatest exports from the industry. And it is, I don't think so, it's a coincidence that these brilliant scripts and books and adaptations have gone to him, just like The Life of Pi and others. Of course, so he was also in Sat Khun Maaf, Susanna's Seven Husbands. It's not a mere coincidence that these scripts and books were going to him.
Not at all. In fact, right before this particular session, I was wondering what I should do with all the book nerd members, and one of the things I thought of doing was perhaps read my own reviews from of these adaptations,
Yeah,
like the review of Life of Pi when it came out, or the review of Makbul when it came out, or for that matter, review of Sat Khun Maaf when it came
yeah,
out. That was obviously based on a book
yeah.
that Vinny, I think, has read. No, Vinny
No,
has read.
I read it.
Uh,
I read it.
Oh, you read which?
Vinny,
Which one of you is the
Vinny has read Life of Pi.
Life of Pi? Right, right. So, and it's incredible that the when I reread them, thinking maybe I'll just read them here at some point, was the fact of you know Irfan being at the center of those works.
Yeah,
And these are works that will survive public memory. Whether at an international level, a film like Life of Pi is beyond great literature being translated into great cinema. It's actually great cinema, sort of taking a little bit from great literature.
of course.
It's an unfilmable book.
Yeah,
And when you watch it, you're not really watching an adaptation. You're watching the goddamn tiger leaping at you.
yeah,
It's cinematic
yeah,
in a way that you fall off your seat. You know what I mean? And that's because it's Ang Lee. And then there is Irfan Khan, which is even when I see a film like Sat Khun Maaf,
yeah,
because by that time, and I was just I didn't know that by that time he'd already done a film with Wes Anderson. He'd already done The Amazing Spider-Man. He'd already done a film. He'd already done Life of Pi at that
yeah,
time as well.
yeah,
So and of course it all started for him with Meera Nair, which is Meera Nair's namesake,
yeah,
which is also an adaptation
yeah,
from a book, with a
yeah,
lovely Chumpa Lahiri book.
yes,
So I think he's been very fortunate, uh, but has worked really hard to become that fortunate as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
One of the things that one understands about his life is the fact that he had been around in Bombay as an actor right from the late 80s,
yeah,
all through the 80s, all through the late 80s, all through the 90s. There was nothing about him in the films. He
yeah,
had no role to play in the scheme of things when it came to cinema per se. Even right after 2001, there was not one filmmaker who thought of casting him in a movie.
yeah,
It was a British filmmaker, Asif Kapadia, who gave him a part in The Warrior, which became what it did
yeah,
for a British audience
right,
that the Indians then saw,
yeah,
perhaps Bombay filmmakers then saw, and perhaps also saw some potential in him. So, and if you get a chance, please do read this piece. I think it sort of summarizes Irfan Khan in a way that you'll hopefully identify
sure,
with. It's in midday, or you can just find me on uh, uh, Facebook or on Twitter
yeah,
at Mayank
yeah,
W14, and I have
yeah,
shared it there. The point that that piece essentially tries to make is that it starts with the New York Times piece on Irfan's life, which is arguing for whether he would be the first Indian to be an American mainstream leading man.
yeah,
And the piece goes on to argue about how it took the Indians, about 13 years of him being around to become an Indian leading man here in a part for him.
yeah.
I think thereafter it was just best material, finding the best actor that we've had in this country.
Yeah. I think Rashme Sehgal is also joining us. Before that, Mayank, I wanted to ask you about these book to movie adaptations. I mean, they are again, back in fashion, and a lot of events are being held. In, of course, in Bombay, one of those is by Mami, I think so, if I'm not wrong. That they are, the book to screen event. So, what do you see going forward? Is this going to be the trend because of the OTT platforms and everybody coming in? Are they longing for this kind of content?
Proper Indian adaptation or an Indian web series to go global was Sacred Games, and it is an Indian novel. Uh, and I think when you're looking at a novel, you are looking at a series, because it has multiple subplots and multiple uh, characters, and you can flesh them out in a way that you couldn't in a film. So I think I'd like to believe that web series adapts itself rather well to novels per se.
Okay.
And the thicker the novel, the more depth there would be
Right.
in the content to be able to flesh them out
Right.
as a screenplay.
Right.
I think, but the big problem that in general adaptations have faced, and which is why you'll always have this debate, and people who read a particular book and when they see that particular book being made into a movie, the first thing they say is, "Hey man, I love the book much more," and that's because a book is a far more interactive exercise.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So when I am reading a book, one element of it is the fact that I am the director of that book. In the sense of I am the costume designer of the book. I am the production, uh, you know, production. Well, not just production assistant. I am the freaking art director of the
Yeah.
book, because
Yeah.
when I'm reading it, I'm imagining what the person looks like. So I've done the casting for the book in my head. I can imagine what the world will look like. Of course, I've been aided by the writer, of course, but then it's all in my head that actually creating my own film when I read a book, as
Right.
against when I watch the adaptation of that book into cinema, then I am seeing someone else's visual interpretation of it, and now there is no other way to see it to see it in any other form, because
Right.
it's done for me. So in that sense, cinema is a little lazier for a consumer's point of view. It's a lazier medium because
Yeah.
it's all given to you. Whereas there is far more imagination and far greater ownership involved when you read a novel. Uh, uh, so that's the one element, that the thing between books and movies, that show up rather often in conversations when one compares one to the other.
Right.
The second thing is about, of course, the books have this incredible uh, thing going of capturing internal monologues, or what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
something that films, by virtue of being visual medium, they cannot. So I can tell you what I'm thinking, but if I have to see that in a film, it has to either be shown through action,
Yeah.
or that lazy exercise, which is a voiceover, which
Yeah.
is not always as much fun. So there also books score, but I think where movies score, by and large, is because of the fact of it being lazy. It's such a tribal experience. It's such a community experience,
Yeah.
and it takes very little, and you can just switch it on and you'll watch it. As
Yeah.
against far more effort
Of
that
course.
goes into reading a novel.
Of course. In fact, while I was reading this one, and I spent all morning reading this, and it's a strange sort of journey for this book, this material, because initially what happened was that uh, Vishal Bhardwaj read the short story, and again he could not, make it into a movie because there was not enough to chew on, perhaps. So then he asked Ruskin Bond to make it into a novella, and then of course Ruskin Bond kept sending small chapters, one chapter each to him on his sets, and then of course the movie came into being. And I mean I would recommend this book and this entire journey because it's got the screenplay also within it, so you can see exactly what the journey of a material can be. It's quite a unique thing in these, I mean, it's an unusual sort of journey for a material.
No, absolutely. I think there are some writers on occasion who set out to write a book knowing that it will be turned into a film eventually. But by and large, people write books for the sake of books, and people make films for the sake of films.
Yeah.
The two are not supposed to necessarily be a simultaneous process.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was. If I'm not mistaken, it was a 4-page short story,
Yeah, that.
which was then turned into an 80-page novella. Uh, and then almost simultaneously was being worked on as a screenplay with Vishal Bharadwaj and Matthew Robbins.
Yes.
Matthew Robbins, for those who don't know, is a pretty major heavyweight screenwriter. He's written for Spielberg in the past, and Del Toro as well. He's written films for them. So there was an international screenwriter, or the Hollywood screenwriter,
Yeah.
working with Vishal Bharadwaj simultaneously. So I think the process of this film, where there's a writer who's writing a book which is separate from the film, but a film is being designed around the book that's currently being written, is fascinating in its own way. And yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to believe it almost is a story of its own.
Yeah. So, Mayank, let's talk about Rishi ji for a moment. And what a man, and what a journey. And of course, everybody knew somehow that it's going to end perhaps this way only, because you can be slightly positive. Of course, you always know that it is looming somewhere. The cancer is looming somewhere. Tell us something about him. You have interacted with him personally in many interviews, etc. And of course, we'll talk about the book later.
Sure. I did interact a lot with him over the past 3 or 4 years in particular for a couple of reasons. One, the fact that I hosted his retrospective, which we ran with the Jagran Film Festival that we ran across 16 cities, which were his favorite 8 films that he'd worked on. So
Okay.
we showed those films while he was around. I think one of the things that was what is amazing about his career, and certainly at the phase of his career that he was in, is the fact that he was being recognized as an actor at this
Yeah.
hour
Yeah.
of his lifetime,
Yeah.
because he was getting to play various kinds of roles which were all very different from each other, and something that he didn't get as much chance to do at the earlier phase, because stardom at that time was a very limiting experience creatively for most people, because you were typecasted into a genre, and he was a romantic lead, as it were, because he would not fit into the action stereotype anyway. So he had this incredible knack of being, as he called it himself, the wrong person, or well, the right person at the wrong time. So
Yeah.
he was a romantic star who made his debut in 1973 with a film Bobby, which is the same year as Amitabh Bachchan's breakout film that was Zanjeer, and that established Amitabh Bachchan as the angry young man.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the phase of action cinema in Bollywood, and mainstream cinema had really become so much about action with Amitabh Bachchan right on top of the scheme of things, as it were.
Yeah.
And then, of course, throughout the 80s, it became all the more about action, and even B-grade action movies. With a lot of actors like Mithun Chakrabarti and the others taking over that space, even up until the early 90s, even mid 90s for that matter. And then, again, mid 90s again, which is when Rishi Kapoor would be in his 40s by then, is where you see romance making its come back onto the silver screen
Yeah.
with films of Shah Rukh Khan, and uh, you know, I think the turning point at some level would have been a movie like Kayamat Se Kayamat Tak, which of course
Yeah.
was in 1989. But then Chandni was also a turning point in its own way. But of course, it was a much more mature love story in its own right.
Yeah.
So you see him at the cusp of two things that he could not be part of. He could not be part of action while he was a romantic star, and then there was a romance that took over the big screen, and that's when he was fading in terms of being the romantic star. He could play other roles, of course, but he gave up. He took a huge long break
Yeah.
back in 1998. So this was a return, and this is when he could be a villain in a film like Agnipath, or he could be a really cutesy grandfather in a film like Kapoor and Sons. He could be a middle class regular guy who's a maths teacher in a school in a film like Do Duni Char. And of the 8 that he picked up from a career of 50 years,
Yeah.
almost 50 years if you count. I mean, 1970 is when Mera Naam Joker came out,
Yeah.
which was his first film. Uh, there was a bias that he had towards films that he was doing currently, which is what hurts us more, because here's a guy, at the best phase of his career,
Yeah.
and that's when we lost him.
Yeah. In fact, who can forget Mulk? I mean, that was some great work also. And I really wanted to talk about a little bit, touch upon his book, because when I attended his book launch, I mean, you'll be happy. Everybody would be happy to know that there was not even, it was a full traffic jam at JLF at in the front lawns. I mean, I did not expect that, to be honest. I thought that only the Chetan Bhagats of the world would get that in the front lawns, or the great authors all across the globe. And also, he has, I believe that he's the only Kapoor from the family who has actually written an autobiography. Nobody else has got himself. Of course, books have been written about him, but he's the only one who has done it in first person.
Well, a couple of things here. I think the whole tradition of people recording their lives, Indian public figures recording their lives as they saw it, with a certain degree of honesty, revealing aspects about themselves that may not have been in public domain, is not something that we've been familiar with all through these years. It's not been a common thing, unlike the West, where you'll find practically all the big guys in their fields either writing on their own, which is their memoir or the autobiography, or writing in conjunction with somebody, but authorized autobiography, where also the fact that it has certain meat in it. It's not just a hagiography, it's not just a
Yeah.
hero worship book, but it's got certain aspects of their life and their times and their personalities that show their vulnerable sides.
Yeah.
And very few people in India, where people in popular culture tend to take themselves so seriously, are even capable of writing a book about their lives, which is almost a tell-all in a way that at least I won't be bored of
Yeah.
the same person talking about how great that same person is,
Yes.
or somebody else writes that book for you, and we have
Yeah.
a whole series of such books about Indian public figures
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Whether that's a Narendra Modi, who probably has 250 books about him. Or
Yeah.
anybody else for that matter.
Yeah.
And more so even in the case of showbiz and stardom, because you've always seen stars from a distance. They're supposed to be people who exist in another sky, literally. So I think that has just recently begun to change, and it's such a welcome change. Dev Anand wrote a fabulous uh, autobiography,
Okay.
which I think captures certain aspects of his life, which we would have never known. He's like literally like it's a tell-all in its own way.
Yeah.
I think the best Indian public figure autobiography, regardless of which field they're from,
Yeah.
would in my mind would be Nasiruddin Shah's book, which he wrote I think a couple of years back. It's
Okay.
fascinating how much that man is willing to share about all those things that we may not even want to share with our friends sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's real in that sense, very raw.
Yeah.
It's almost brutal in certain ways when he talks about his life, about his foibles,
Yeah.
about his pitfalls, about his downs, and about basically being human, as we all are. I mean, none of us is perfect. And I think in that regard, Khullam Khulla, which is Rishi Kapoor's book, uh, stands that particular test.
Yeah.
It passes the test of it being not just look at me how great I am,
Yeah.
but this is my story. And guys, I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he wrote it when he did. Of course, he co-wrote it. He wrote it with Meena Iyer, who's the author
Yes.
of the book. She used to be a Times of India journalist. Used to be with Bombay Times before.
Yeah.
But obviously, the words are his. She basically would have put it together, having held conversations with him over a period of time. And it's incredible how this person is willing to let out certain things, like, for instance, the fact that he bought the Filmfare Award. Now, which public figure would come out and say that, yeah, man, I paid
Goodness.
30,000 rupees and I bought my first Filmfare Award, and
That
he
was-
says that in his book.
That was hilarious, to be honest. And looking at his
Yeah.
Twitter, no surprises actually.
Yeah, but I mean, I am sure he's not the first one.
Yeah.
I am sure he's not the only one.
Of course.
But I'm absolutely certain that he's the only one who's ever said it.
Were you flabbergasted when you heard about that or read it?
Yeah, totally. But these are aspects of a book that make the book endearing to you. In fact, one of the interviews that I did with him at the City Fort Auditorium in Delhi, which was part of the retrospective, I made him repeat the whole story with all the details and who was the secretary that he gave the money to. And then he said, he confessed that maybe he did not win that award because of that. Maybe the secretary sort of took the money and would have taken money from others, and he was a deserving one. Who cares? But the fact is, he did pay 30,000 rupees, and he did have a Filmfare Award after that. So
And
that is the fact of the matter.
That's a huge amount in those times.
Yeah, 30,000, 1973, man. That's a huge one.
That's a lot. Yeah. So, Mayank, we'll come back to you. I need to ask you a couple of more questions, and everybody else will have questions for you. If you can mute yourselves, we can welcome Rashme Sehgal, another journalist who has joined us. We wanted to ask about what she's been up to and talk a little bit about, of course, Macbeth and perhaps the adaptation as well, Maqbool. If somebody has got any questions for Mayank about, he specializes in a lot of things, including books. So he has got one book to his name, and you can ask him anything. And after that, I'll continue with my question. Yeah, Varun, go for it. Yeah, go for it, Varun. Yeah.
Hi, man. Like a week ago, after Rishi Kapoor's death, there was this conversation about like how do you mourn somebody in public who's like a complicated figure. And there was this like huge like kerfuffle on Twitter about people who were sort of, people wanted to remind that Rishi Kapoor has had some problematic like history with like his behavior towards women and maybe his own wife. And how do you reconcile, like, where do you stand on this? Like, what do you think should be sort of, how does the public sort of publicly mourn somebody who has had a complicated history without whitewashing them, but while still not being disrespectful to the dead? He's mute. I can't hear him.
Yeah.
Can you hear me
He's
now?
mute.
Yeah, sure. Go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm a little conflicted, as most people would be, on something like this, because it basically the question originates in the aspect of separating the art from the artist as well, and that's something that comes up again and again. Whether you take it in the context of, say, a Woody Allen and what he did or did not do, or in the case of Picasso and how he was and how he wasn't. And then, of course, with the case of Rishi Kapoor, I mean, there was some discussion about him and his uh, behavior with his wife, as it were, if I'm not mistaken. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I did not follow this too well. But I think it had something to do with a domestic violence case that was registered in with the police that happened at some point. Now, few things. One, I don't know how much we know about people's personal lives to have much to comment on outside of the fact that they are part of our personal lives, right? That's one aspect. So what I find on social media, and it's a done thing on social media, and too many things are done things on social media that should not be, is everyone feels the right to comment on everything as if they were experts on everything. So it can go from the price of diesel to what Rishi Kapoor was, how he was with his own wife. Now that's a conversation that only his wife is in a position to make and speak with authority on, perhaps his kids. I don't think. I mean, I have interviewed Ranbir before, and I have brought up this in the manner of a question, because that's what you do in conversations which are public conversations. You can do those things, and you can ask a question. They can choose not to answer. And he has spoken about how it was not an easy childhood for him. Because his parents, I mean, there was domestic discord. There was an issue between them as a couple. But that's where it needs to remain. It needs to remain when something about a family, it needs to remain there, simply because we don't know any better, right? And so I'm pretty clear on that front when it comes to something. But if it's something which is public, is where the larger debate comes into play. And so, for instance, if there is M.T. Akbar, who's a writer, of course, and who's been accused of multiple cases of ranging from rape to harassment to molestation. Now, would I stop myself from reading Riot After Riot, which is the book I'm reading currently, which is essentially a book on the 80s and the 90s, the series of riots that communal riots that took place that he covered as a journalist. Now, I want to find out about that. Now, what he does with the women who work with him in his office, and they should file police cases, and he should be put in jail for all I care. But will I stop myself from learning about the culture of communal rights in India between the late 90s up until the late 80s up until the early 90s? As a result of that, I think the loss will be mine. So I think personally, I would like to set in my head for myself, and this is not something that I am prescribing to people. It's totally up to them how they would like to view it. But personally, I would not. I would like to separate the art from the artist, to be able to enrich myself, for it to not be my own personal loss. And I do love Woody Allen movies, and I think I'll continue to watch them for the films. But if he's done anything of the sort that he's been accused of, I think he should die a very bad death in jail, for being a pedophile, for God's sake.
Yeah,
but that is very separate from Woody Allen movies.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayank. Hope you got your answer, Varun. Mayank, I wanted to ask you something, and of course, anybody else can also ask questions. Mayank, as you said that I mean, you have been. I mean, you have been on both sides. You are a writer. I'm not being platform specific. You write for all kinds of mediums. Which one gives you the most satisfaction? I mean, it's quite obvious, but still I wanted to ask that question.
No, I think the way the world is headed, where media is merging, where there's very little distinction between a video and a written material and a published material in a book form, and whether that book form is in a Kindle form, whether
Yeah.
Kindle form is in a website form,
Mhm.
whether what I'm saying is an audio book or is it a podcast?
Yeah.
Is my column something that I'm just telling you right on your face,
Yeah.
or is something that you're reading? I think it's all merging in ways where I like to believe that you just have to become a media person rather than a writer, rather than just a journalist.
Right.
Because I can catch it and inform. I think there was one thing that we were always told as kids, that books is a very it's a very virtuous art form, and that we should all be readers, and as we should be. And there's a lot of value attached to someone being a reader.
Yeah.
uh, Automatically someone being well read is seen as someone who's very intelligent, or someone of a higher form of a human being. And I think that needs to go. I think
Yeah.
that's just made for too many years, at least in India. That's made books deeply inaccessible because they're seen as deeply esoteric as well.
Yes.
Uh, and that's one of the reasons why cinema has had such a huge advantage, or even television has
Yeah.
had such a huge advantage over books. But I'm saying, how does it matter whether I read that book in the form of an audio book where I just heard all of it
Yeah.
and I imbibed it,
Yeah.
or I even saw a fabulous adaptation of that book into a series?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there's a point being made, and that point can be made through multiple media. If there's something I want to say,
Yeah.
now whether I say that through a podcast, or I say that through a column, through a
Yeah.
written column,
Yeah.
I say that through a review,
Yeah.
I say that through an interview, I say that through a book I wrote, or I say that through a screenplay I wrote.
Yeah.
As long as that's the point I wanted to make and
Right.
that's been conveyed, I think we need to become more and more media agnostic.
Awesome. Great words from coming from you, and you have all going for you. So you are comfortable on platforms. That's great. And of course, why don't you have a podcast yet? We would love to listen to that.
Yes, I am actually working on a podcast
Oh, great.
as we speak.
Great.
That's been one good thing that's come out of this COVID thing. Because the problem with also being a journalist, and
Hmm.
that too a newspaper journalist, is that
Hmm.
on any given day there's a deadline to meet, and there's
Yeah.
stuff that you need to put out. So once that gets over, you almost
Yeah.
feel like, okay, I need to chill now.
Yeah.
So it never gives you because there is very little time between the commute
Right.
and your work.
Yeah.
So that commute time is gone. Yes, I am working on a podcast. I really hope that you guys love it.
Of course, of course. I wanted to go
Yeah.
to Rashmi ji, who has just joined us. This online thing is not that easy for anyone. So let's be very patient with everyone. Rashmi ji, welcome to the Booknerds Online Book Club.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Finally, we have troubled you a lot with this online endeavor of ours. But I would like to introduce everyone to Rashmi ji. That she is a seasoned journalist. She has written for the Telegraph, the Times of India, and other platforms. And she's passionate about environment. And she has written five odd books. So welcome to the Booknerds Online Book Club, Rashmi ji.
Yeah, but I must confess to you
Yeah.
that I am a film buff, but I have no expertise on the subject, and I'm quite overawed by all that I'm hearing my colleague Mayank talk. He sounds so erudite that my association with cinema is largely because my husband, my late husband Anil Sari, was he was like a he introduced the looking at Hindi cinema from its sociological aspects. And when he passed away, Oxford brought out two books, which is a compilation of his writings. But that said, I would also just like to, I mean, I support entirely what Mayank said about MJ Akbar because he was my former editor in the Asian Age,
Okay.
and though I had when I joined the Asian Age full time, he was not there. But he has. You cannot take away from the man's insight into politics and insight, and his whole he's brought in a lot of history and his knowledge of history into journalism, which was, in a sense, missing before he was there when he launched the Telegraph.
Don't be, Rashmiji, don't be afraid of Mayank. It's just that I have asked him to talk about these legends. Otherwise, he would be talking about name, place, animal thing right now. So don't worry
No,
about
I'm
him.
not afraid.
Yeah,
I said I'm impressed.
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
He's one of our top critics. We are all
yeah,
impressed. Yeah.
yeah,
So Rashmiji, I
yeah.
wanted to talk about, of course, Macbeth. If you could give your comments on that, and we can, of course, move to Makbul later on with Mayank.
You wanted me to talk about Macbeth
Yes,
as in the play,
yes,
or
yes.
as it adapted for Makbul.
Anything. Yeah,
Well, I mean, I think everyone who's listening into this knows that Shakespeare is probably one of the greatest playwrights that has ever lived, and it's not for nothing that he's called Bard of Avon. And the fact that his tragedies, in a sense, are so best loved, despite all the blood and gore that one is witness to. And I think Macbeth, in a sense, I mean, Macbeth, Hamlet, and Othello are three of his greatest tragedies, all three of which, very interestingly, you see have been adapted by the same person, Vishal
yeah,
Bhardwaj,
yeah,
which is quite remarkable. And the fact that he's made a trilogy,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and the screenplay has been woven with great care, and I would say with a great sensitivity.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
you
thank.
know
Uh,
so of course, I mean my saying, and I think another thing about his tragedies, which is in a sense very similar, I mean Shakespeare's tragedies, which is very similar to what we are witness to in India. uh, if you see it, you would see it in our political class to an extent, is that you have people coming in who rise to depths, who rise to great heights, you
yeah,
know. I don't want to start naming them, and then they have these great falls,
yeah,
you know. Of course, this is not to say that the great falls are because, as with Macbeth, whatever the scheming and whatever was going on between him and Lady Macbeth, we were witness to because it was all being staged. But we are not witness to that in India, but we kind of, we are putting things together, whether as journalists or whether just as individual voters, and then you see this as the great phenomenal rise of Indira Gandhi, and then the kind of way in which she was assassinated for
yeah,
whatever reasons. But what I'm saying is, we are witness to the uh, to the waning and waxing of our political leaders. And I think, there is an element of great tragedy which is being played out before us in our political scenario. And I think, in his own way, Makbul kind of, in a much smaller manner, tries to encapsulate that,
yeah.
you know. Of course,
Thank you,
it does.
ma'am. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. We'll come back to you. If you can mute yourself, we can go to Mayank again.
So,
Mayank, I wanted to ask you about the adaptation, of course, of Macbeth to Makbul, and what is this fascination of Vishal Bhardwaj with these Shakespeare tragedies, and he was also involved in this one, Saat Khun Maaf. So what's happening with him, and of course the adaptation. A little bit about that.
Right. Firstly, thank you, Rashmi, for those kind words. You should know that I'm a huge fan of your late husband, Anil Sari. I've read the Oxford books, the Oxford University Press books that you were talking about, and I've read his work in Illustrated Weekly that he wrote before, and this fascinating work to do with cinema. Um, so thank you, saying hi again. So far as Vishal Bharadwaj and Shakespeare is concerned, Ron, uh, I don't think he's the first person to adapt Shakespeare or will be
Okay.
the last. In fact, there have been so many adaptations of Shakespeare on a weekly basis, not just in Hindi cinema, but definitely Hindi cinema.
Yes.
It's amazing that Vishal Mehta was the first person to just acknowledge it.
Yeah, yeah.
Every love story is a Romeo and Juliet there.
Yes,
What
yes,
is
yes.
what is Romeo and Juliet if not every Bollywood film?
Yeah.
And so many other characters or so many other plays of his, and that's of course full credit to Shakespeare, who could write at the time that he did something that remains relevant every day. In fact, becomes more relevant
Yeah.
with time.
Yeah.
It almost seems to me sometimes, and you guys should just Google it.
Yeah.
Some of his famous quotes, and it occurs to you that every single proverb there is, every single thing that we hear of as we think of as cliches, are all lines from Shakespeare's plays. So anything that had to be said has already been said by Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Not a surprise that it keeps getting adapted. But I think what Vishal did were two things with it. One, of course, was the kind of adaptation it was. The way he set it in contemporary times, the color he gave it, the form he gave it, the way he replaced the characters from the original play into something so organic to an Indian life and to Indian underworld life. That was one aspect of it. That's something we're not used to in that sense. It's almost a birth of new cinema in its own way. I think all of us remember, at least people my age, distinctly remember the night when we first watched Macbeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we have distinct memory of when we watched that movie. That's the level of impact it led. I mean, the first thing, one of the first things I did the night when I was sleeping is actually just text a few friends of mine and just check with them. Guys, do you remember when we went to watch Macbeth? Because they all remember.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this. I mean, of course, in the context of Irrfan, because nobody knew Irrfan at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Irrfan, as I said, had been around for a good 13 to 15 years in Bombay, but nobody knew. I mean, people had seen him in TV shows like Chandrakanta and Banaiya
Yeah.
Apni Baat and all. But that man on that screen is something else. I mean, he just knocks you over, right? So there was that. Then there is Don Abbaji. That's Pankaj Kapoor. Now, Pankaj Kapoor, I think the last great role that he done was 13 years before, Ek Doctor Ki Maut.
Yes.
So while we consider him the great actor, we've always considered him like this powerhouse of talent that he always was. He's been in such great movies, but we completely forgotten him until Maqbool.
Yeah.
So we were struck by this. I mean, that role was also an adaptation in a huge way from Don Corleone. From Godfather. I mean, he was in his own way, paying tribute to Marlon Brando, but he was Pankaj Kapoor in his own.
Let me stop you right there. I am always jealous of your picture with you in the middle, Al Pacino on the right or the left.
That is true. That's true.
And Robert De Niro on his right. I mean, I was you have to be jealous of that. Guys, do go to the internet and see that picture. That is something of, you have to be envious of that. What was the feeling like?
Well, that's one interview I'll take to the grave. I did not see it coming. It's okay. It's one thing for someone to meet Robert De Niro, and that would be great as well. And it's another thing also to meet Al Pacino. That's amazing too. But to do an interview with both of them together, because just having both of them together on screen is considered a huge moment in history, right?
Yeah.
So that just it screwed me over. Like,
okay.
Thankfully, I was in my senses during the course of the interview. So I was fucked before. Like, I didn't know how to respond before the interview. I didn't know what to hit me after the interview. But during the interview, it seemed like I was just talking to Alan and Bob. Like these two guys who could be my friends.
Wow.
I mean, that's how it was for those 20 or 50, but it was about 20 minutes. Yes.
I suppose that those moments lend you to believe that I've done it all, right? It must be that feeling, right?
It is hard to top this one. Yes.
Yes.
It's hard to top, especially for people my age, for all my friends. I mean, my WhatsApp group with my buddies is that picture. You know what I mean? This is like, that's our guy. Like Al Pacino is our guy.
Yeah.
And De Niro is our guy.
Yes.
So having both them together in a conversation was, I mean, the only thing that can beat it would be to have Brando in the same room.
Yes.
But Brando is no more.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
not possible.
So I guess you can't beat this. Yeah.
You are wishing for too much, Mayank. Don't do that.
Like bringing the dead alive.
Okay, great. So what we'll do is we can have another question to you can ask it to Mayank or Rashmi ji. Guys, you can come in and ask any other question. and then we can move forward.
Can I ask a question to Rashmi ji?
Varun, yeah, go for it till somebody else can come in. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask, okay, like with all these adaptations, with like these Shakespeare adaptations that Vishal Bhardwaj has done, Omkara has this it's not even subtext, like cast as part of the plot, and Heather has this like Kashmir backdrop, and it's about like missing the people that the army just executed and like buried in unmarked graves. Do you think popular cinema can like go on being political, or do you think that this government is like, do you think films like this that have big casts, that have big releases, can still continue getting made in the current political climate, or do you think this is going to get clamped down? The politics is going to be a little more a little less overt.
Uh, Rashmi ji?
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that it really depends on who the film is targeting. I mean, if they're going to make if you do something which is going to directly hit out at the security forces in Kashmir, I do not think in the present environment that kind of movie will be permitted. As I said, it depends on how you move it. If it's going to be a sort of a direct attack against the malfunctioning of the current dispensation, I certainly don't see it being presented in that genre. But yes, I think if you do it in different ways, I I don't know, maybe today of course we have all these web alternatives, so maybe there they could have releases, but I would say that it is for journalists, for example, it is becoming increasingly difficult to write on certain kinds of stories which one would want to do. And I think that journalists are doing some kind of internal censorship today when they're writing, because you've had journalists go to jail in Mirzapur, for example, only because this man wrote about how they, in Anganwadis, they were getting just roti with some salt to eat. So the guy was jailed. But I would also say another thing, which I think is very significant, is the kind of movie where, like Amar Akbar Anthony, where you had a Hindu, a Christian, and a Muslim. So you're reflecting India's diverse culture. Would you see that kind of movie in that format being made today? I don't know. This is something that I often think about. With the kind of joy and delight that those movies reflected, as well as deeper sociological meanings. It's I think it's something that because I think our psyche as a nation is also changing, at least as reflected in social media.
Yeah, thank you, Rashmi ji. Thank you, Varun, for the question. I hope that answers it for you. I would like to ask Mayank a final question, and we'll let him go. We have taken too much time. Mayank, Varun, can you mute yourself? Yeah. Mayank, first of all, I know you work on multiple things at a time, and do you get time to read? And what about, if you do, what are your some of the reads that you have appreciated, perhaps for the book nerds here?
Well, a lot of what I do is also supposed to be my work. So this whole work from home and work-life balance is kind of totally imbalanced in my case.
Okay.
I watch movies, and that is work for me. And so I don't know what hobbies I should have. Maybe my hobby should be accountancy. My hobby should be
You are
you know
lucky. You are lucky.
no, I don't know. It's work. I don't know what is luck. It's just no work. Well, I have been. I really like this last book that I finished. All my reading is nonfiction,
Okay.
by the way.
Okay.
Because so much of my um, uh, movies, and so much fiction comes from movies I watch and so many web series. And I need like what's going on in the real world kind of situation with my books. And I quite liked Snigdha Poonam's book. Uh,
Okay.
which I finished a couple of days back,
Okay.
which is on young India.
Okay.
And it's essentially a journalistic account where she's profiled a whole lot of young people who have huge ambitions about making it big in what is called New India now. But those ambitions are fraught with a lot of dangers in terms of the imbalance there's going to be between your dreams and what you're likely to fulfill. And it's going to get worse because the economy is going to it's going to cut if it's not tanked already.
Yeah.
It's going to tank hugely. And it's not like we were doing rather well before this in any case.
Yeah.
So in a certain way, I found that book to be a decent wake up call, also to understand, especially through social media, sort of people that you come across, the ones who've been sold to a certain ideology at such a young age, who have such a strong philosophies, so to say, as they call it, about how India is and how India was and where the direction it should be taking. Where is that coming from? It's certainly not coming from education, because if they were educated enough, they would not be talking a lot of the nonsense that they do. So you get a good sense of that, the new India that I see on social media through this book, which is totally journalistic, of course, by Snigdha Puram. I
Okay.
think you should pick it up.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
And guys, pick
yeah.
up my book in case you're looking for a recommendation.
Yeah.
I told you,
Yeah, of
when I would
course.
still
Yeah.
plug my book. It's been quite a few years now.
Of course. And my question was about that only. When is the second one coming up? It's due. Maybe it can be an
Yes.
audiobook also. You never know.
I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and play the form this time, and probably see what is it that one can do in a multimedia space rather than the traditional book as we've always known it. So
Yeah.
let's see where we go with that.
Yeah. Waiting for that. Thank you so much, Mayank. Thank you for being
Amazing
with
to
us.
have. Amazing to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mayank. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Rohan.
Bye.
Cheers.
Okay, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go one by one to everyone, and you can just express your opinion. What has happened with all the books on the menu. Just your opinions. What do you do? Your name, and then we'll go on further with the session. So we can go to Chiranjeev Mohan, and then we'll go back to Swarnim.
Hello everyone, good evening for this session. Myself Chiranjeev Mohan. I am from Assam, but currently I am stationed in Delhi. I work as an energy auditor for environment and sustainability. So I'll be talking about the Macbeth, because Shakespeare is one of my most favorite authors of all times, of all eras, of all genres. So speaking of Macbeth, I came first of all I was introduced to Shakespeare in when I was in the 6th standard. So actually, on a particular day, so the teachers day we used to have, so we were given a task, because all students used to all students were given tasks. So we were given task to do a play from Shakespeare, and we were given the play Macbeth to actually portray on the stage. And my character was Macduff, so the one who kills Macbeth actually. So through that, I came in connection with Shakespeare, and then I started reading all the stories like Othello, King Lear, Romeo and Juliet, and Midsummer Night's Dream, and Cymbeline. So many books are there, and they have all are so beautiful. So from Macbeth, what we can learn is that the way you sow, so shall you reap. That's what I get from there. So life, the same thing happens with life also. So your life is molded with many good and bad thoughts. So you pay as you reap. So that's what Macbeth teaches us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chiranjeev. Thank you. You can mute yourself. We'll go back to Swarnim now.
Right. Is it better now?
Yeah. Much better.
Okay. So if I have to give an introduction about myself, then I am Swarnim. I am in Mumbai now. I was in Dehradun for 3 years in between. I came to know Booknerds, and I've been friends with Rohan and Neha ever since. I work with a company called Raw Pressery here. We sell juices. So if you're ever in any metro city, please do try us out.
Well done, Swarnim.
Always salesperson, man. You know that about me. Right. So, okay, I have read Life of Pi. I haven't watched the movie. It was a fantastic book. I would say, because I finished that book sometime in 2013, around the same time as me, because I saw a Facebook post very recently that I had published. It was on Life of Pi. I don't remember. I cannot give you exact anecdotes because it's been such a long time. But the 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 book, it shook me. The way it started and the ending. My God, the ending.
Yeah.
The how it puts everything into perspective and makes sense. Because during a point of time for me, it seemed like, where is this story going? What is
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah.
But ultimately, when the final revelation happens, you understand, okay, everything makes sense. And there are certain anecdotes, especially one which is very gross, very, very gross. Uh, uh, it was related to hunger and food. I think those who have read it would understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That anecdote was especially poignant because it showed what ultimately it comes down to hunger and how you're feeling and what somebody will go to an extent.
Yeah.
And keeping that in mind with respect to the final revelation, it becomes even more profound.
Yeah.
So that from I still after 7-8 years, I still remember that part.
Yeah.
It has written back on me.
Yeah.
Okay, talking about again Maqbool, I have watched the movie, but again it's been a really long time.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Vishal Bharadwaj. Have watched Saat Khoon Maaf also. Uh, impressed with his work, impressed with the stories. Shakespeare is always fantastic. Again, apologies, not read Shakespeare, but I've watched the trilogy of Vishal Bharadwaj. Fantastic direction, amazing work, and the story itself. And Irfan Khan is always it was just
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic. And so was Pankaj Kapoor.
It's so weird, it's we always want to talk about these legends in present tense. It's hard to talk about them in the past tense. So uh,
I,
yeah, that's something. Thank you, Swarnim. Thank you. We'll come back to you. I would like to go to Priyakshi to talk about Khullam Khulla, which she has read and would like to comment on. She's a part of the Book Nerds editorial team. So Priyakshi, can you just come in and tell us more about this uh, immense journey of Mr. Rishi Kapoor?
Hi everyone.
Yeah,
I
hi.
hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, now Mayank has already touched upon all the interesting points in the book, so I don't know if I have anything left to say, but still, I'll just give you a brief intro. The name Khullam Khulla, for instance, is taken from one of his films, Khel Khel Me, where there's a song sung by Kishore Kumar and Asha Bhosle, Khullam Khullam Pyar Karenge Hum Dono,
Yeah.
a very popular song. And most of his songs, as you know, have been really, really popular. They're played all the time on radio. So Rishi Kapoor was born on 4th September 1952, and he was born with a silver spoon into the great family, the first family of Indian cinema, Prithviraj Kapoor's family. Okay, his father was Raj Kapoor, mother Krishna Kapoor, and his uncles were the great Shashi Kapoor and Shami Kapoor. So you can imagine the lineage, the kind of family legacy that he inherited. Okay, so he was born with a silver spoon. There was a great deal of hullabulla when he was born. It seems there was a major celebration. Okay, so he says that he himself says that he was inducted into films right from the day he was born. He was not good in studies at all. He used to flunk most of the time, kept changing schools and all that. But he started his journey as an actor as a toddler. If you remember that song from the famous Nargis and Raj Kapoor song, where they're under this umbrella. Uh,
Yeah.
and he's along with them, and he says Nargis ji had to actually pamper me with chocolates to make me do that scene because I was throwing a tantrum, and that is how I am. So that these are the early signs of the person that I was growing up to be later on in life. So he is very self-critical. He talks a lot about his brashness, his arrogance, his inability to hold back, from frank speak. He has to say whatever is in his mind. So he is very, very self-critical in this book. But he is full of praise for his directors, his musicians, the singers, and the technicians who he feels played a major part in making Rishi Kapoor who he was, or making those films a success. Okay, so he gives all the credit, entire credit to all these people. And there were some major people he worked with, like Lakshmikant Pyarelal, Shankar Jaikishan, R.D. Burman. His songs are sung by Kishore Kumar and Asha Bhosle. He worked with almost all the heroines that made their first appearance on screen. He quoted almost all of them on screen, and there are juicy stories about his affair with a few of them, like Dimple and Tina Munim and all. But then we don't know the truth of all that. He hasn't touched upon that. But he does say Neetu was very like liberal in giving him, entrusting him in that sense. But there are some interesting points that he makes which I want to touch upon. One is that he says that in a movie made during those times, star power was such that all the other actors used to be eclipsed by that star. So even if you are a very good actor, for instance, like maybe even Rishi Kapoor or somebody else, they would be eclipsed by the major star of those days. Suppose it's Amitabh Bachchan, then Amitabh Bachchan would eclipse the other stars, even though they were very good actors. But that has changed a little now. And it's sad that when he was just getting the roles that he really wanted to do, he had to pass away. He was playing this wonderful character in Agnipath, and the gay dean in the Student of the Year, and very other colorful characters in a few other films, which was very different from the stereotypical image he had of this romantic hero, who used to only sing songs.
Yeah. Priakshi, can I just say bye to Rashmi ji? She has been with us for a long time. Rashmi ji, thank you so much for joining us. I know you were having some problems with the audio and stuff, but thank you so much. Yeah. So Priakshi, you can continue.
Yeah. So from these stereotypical roles, he had moved on to more mature roles, varied roles, and unfortunately, he passed away at that point. When same with Irrfan, when he was just coming into the stardom, he passed away. So it is very sad in that sense. So there are these things that Rishi Kapoor touches upon in this book, aside from, of course, his family and his relationship with his father, his parents, his uncle, and everything, which I think you can read later on. But one or two important points he makes about the movie making business. One is that he's very critical of the present form of movie making. He says that he is not in sync with the sync sound. He doesn't like it at all. He says dubbing was much better, and he still wants to dub whenever he's given the opportunity. In fact, he fights with his directors, I want to dub, because he improvises on the spot when he's dubbing. That is one thing. Another is the loss of the synthesizer has replaced most of the traditional instruments that were used in Hindi cinema earlier. So which has meant meant a loss of work for the traditional instrument players. They're no longer needed, which is again very, very sad. And he urges the young generation of directors to bring back those instruments and use them in some manner. Third is that he is very critical of method acting. He doesn't like it at all. He says he always acted spontaneously, and that is how acting should be. In fact, he was aghast when Ranveer said that he wants to go to some hi-fi, acting school and learn acting there. He was like, "Why? But why do you need to do that?" See, Rishi Kapoor came from a family which, like they ate acting, they breathed acting, they talked about acting all the time. So he did not need to learn it from any other source. Whereas for Ranveer, it's a different generation, a different kind of technique, and different, set of directors. So, it's very different. But still, he's critical of that. So these are some of the important points that he makes about the movie making business. Also, this whole thing of music. He feels that music used to play a very, very important role in the movies of his times, and he feels that they should still play an important role. Because that's our forte. our forte. Like Hindi films are seen because of the music that they have. So there are these new films which have done away with music altogether, or there are these films which only have background music. He doesn't like that at all. So he wants music to be brought back to the movies. And
Priakshi,
I was very touched by this one thing that he talks openly about, how he dealt with depression. Can you imagine a a star of Rishi Kapoor's status going through depression at the peak of his career? Like when I didn't know that Cars was a failure. In fact, I thought it was a very successful film because it was so beautifully made, nice foot tapping music and beautiful scenes, and it was lovely. But it seems it was pitted against Kurbani. Kurbani was released at around the same time. So Kurbani was obviously a more sophisticated, sexier kind of film with Vinod Khanna and Zinat Aman. So it kind of sidelined Curse totally, and Rishi Kapoor went into depression. So he talks about that aspect of his life quite frankly and tells us how he dealt with it. So he says it's not enough to be a star's son, an actor's son, to make yourself to be popular in the film industry or to be a good actor. You have to work on yourself constantly. You have to make
yeah,
yourself a better actor every day. Otherwise, there's no guarantee of success in this line.
I
That there
think,
have been many famous sons of famous actors who have not been successful.
yeah.
So this is the
Priakshi,
basic, yeah,
yeah, I think that crushes the nepotism debate right there. But
right,
people may have different views. I would like to go. Thank you so much for that opinion. You
yeah.
added so much to the entire context of the book, and of course about the legend's life. I would like to go to Bala, who has been very patient with us, listen to us very patiently. And Bala, if you can come in, unmute yourself.
My first introduction to Shakespeare was through that Merchant of Venice. Actually, it would make a good story, I think, for some VC founder for funding a thing. It would make a real good story if somebody can make.
Pound of flesh.
Yeah, a pound of flesh. So then my next thing to Shakespeare was the Comedy of Errors. There was a Hindi movies with Sanjeev Kumar, I think. It was shown in Doordarshan. I'm not remembering the name exactly, but that was one of the things which got me onto.
Angur.
Angur,
The movie was
Angur,
called Angur.
Angur.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The one more comedy, Devan Verma was there, I think.
yeah, Angur, Angur. Swarnim came in. Thank you, Swarnim.
Yeah, so that movie impressed me a lot. After that, of course, I read Macbeth, but I never seen a movie of thing because somehow I felt that cruelness is better imagined than seen on the screen because it gives us our own thing. That is what I feel about books and movies. Is in a book I like after reading this Lord of Rings, I went to see the movie. It's 20 minutes. I told I'm stopping this one because I was having a better imagination of Lord of Rings, I think, when I was reading the book. So I always feel that books are more of an
What about this one?
No, I've not seen that one except for Priyanka Chopra.
Oh,
No, I
oh my
see,
God.
but I see it only for that purpose. Fine.
No, what about the book? You are a Ruskin Bond fan. You didn't read the book? Only Priyanka
No,
Chopra.
no,
What's happening?
I not read that one. I not read.
Okay.
So
Great.
that was the thing, and so I liked reading books rather than think. Of course, books are more of imagination, and movies are depiction. So imagination is much more better than thing. Life of Pi, I read some 30 chapters. After that, I not
Okay.
gone beyond. Still there. When it comes to making movies into books, I think South makes a lot of movies from books, especially the social revolutionary novels, especially down south in Tamil, they make a lot of movies, which it's basically a social story, so it is much more better made into a movie, and the message is carried on a lot, and lot of the radical thoughts which happen in South is because of many of the books being made into movies. And
Yeah.
right now, I think Maniratnam is doing one of the classics, Ponniyin Selvan, into a movie. But if at all he has to do justice for that book, I think that movie should last for 7 years, if not less.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bala, for adding that. Great points. Of course, you need to get some light on your face where in the next hangout. You need to buy something because we can only see your spectacles, nothing else. So I would like to go to Shashikant now. He has been very patient. Let's go to Shashikant.
Uh, this is my first experience with Booknerds, and let me tell you, it has been very interesting, very educative, informative. Though this was on the film books and on the films. Why I joined was primarily because of because of Rishi Kapoor and Irrfan ji. I mean, I have special regards for these people as in personal life also, as well as for their performance in the industry. I don't know much about the books which have been talked about, but then the entire session inspires me to join again whenever it is done. This is what I would say.
Thank you so much, Shashikant. Thank you
That's
so
why
much.
I've been listening very patiently. It was worth it.
Thank you so much, Shashikant. You can mute yourself. I would like to go to Vidushi Nautiyal, who has read The Life of Pi and been very patient to get her turn to talk because she doesn't talk much. She only talks like Basanti because this is a film session. I can say that.
Rohan, can we play a trailer of Life of Pi before she
Oh yes,
begins?
yes. Why not? Let me do that. Just give me a moment. It'll refresh our memory. Also, just give me a moment.
I was sitting in this coffee house, and this old man at the table next to me struck up a conversation. He said you had an amazing story.
Let's see then, where to begin? I was born and raised in one of the most beautiful places on earth. It was a time filled with wonder that I'll always remember. But when my family chose to move our zoo halfway around the world, that is when my greatest journey began. The next part of the story you will find hard to believe.
Stormy skies. She said, oh, I know the sun will set to rise.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I think that revived a lot of memories when we watched the movie, and it's so grand. So I'd like to go to Vidushi quickly.
At first, I have to say that trailer brought back so many memories, especially me listening to Coldplay all night long. That is horror. And what is so amazing about the trailer is the antithetic aspect of it, because there is Coldplay's Paradise playing behind, and that was probably the character's living hell. most of the book and movie. So, before I go on my discussion of this beloved book, I have to say I am guilty of only reading the book after I had already watched the movie. And that is only because I was only a few months old when it came out in 2001. And love it as I might, I didn't come out of the womb breeding. So, my mistake. But anyway, reading the book and then rewatching the movie a few years after that, I had only one question in my mind. And that was, how did they do it? Like, as a theater kid, my knowledge of screenplays and writing consisted of a lot of dialogues and maybe a few instructions on what emotions I have to portray and what the scenery has to be, maybe sometimes a monologue of sorts, and maybe a bit of inner character struggle. But that only lasted for a few scenes or so at most. But here, how did they convert a book that was mainly on the characters' inner conflicts and thoughts and turned it into a movie? And that just bewildered me, right? And that is exactly what makes this so breathtaking, because it transcends all of these boundaries of movie making and visual representations. Life of Pi as a narrative is not just a story of conflict and of survival skills, as it is the story of someone who went through all of that and lived to tell the tale. It makes Mr. Irfan Khan's role so much more impressive because of it. Because in the book, the role of grown up Pi is not as impactful because it is trying to relate more to the audience and the personal struggle of how it can be, well, anyone's struggle in another scenario, right? But in the movie, it is entirely different because it focuses mainly on the turn of events and it focuses so much on the aftermath of it. And that makes his role not just that of a narrative or a voiceover, but rather of a man who went through all of these haunting events and evolved. He changed. He's like a voice of conscience and wisdom, right? And the actor who played this character, my God, what do I have to say about him? He has done complete justice to this role. There is this sadness in his eyes that not many can provoke. Like, there is this hesitation whenever he's talking about the shipwreck and his time at sea, and it replicates that fear of doom and helplessness. And that leaves us with what the book ultimately wants to relay. And that life of Pi inculcates in us that faith is beyond reality. Sure, at the end, life of Pi isn't exactly the model of what real life is. It doesn't even breach the territory of reality, right? But it is a story that has meaning, a purpose, a belief, and ultimately, that's all we can hope from life. That in the end, all our actions, everything that we stood for had meaning, that our life had meaning. And that's what makes this role and this book so completely ethereal. Over to you, sir. I kept it short and sweet.
I think I should call you ma'am because these like 3 to 5 minutes, a lot of wisdom has been imparted by Vidushi. Some great words and extremely theatrical as you are always.
See, this is why I stay quiet.
Thank you so much on your pointers on Life of Pi, a great book and one of those adaptations which are just amazing. I at the end, so I'm very thankful to all of you that you all waited patiently, and I would like to talk about this one, Saath Khoon Maaf. And to be honest, I haven't watched the movie, but the book, oh my God. Can you guys hear me loud and clear? Okay. So talking about this one, man, before the session, I was talking just casually, and I was saying that everybody is a fan of Ruskin Bond, but yeah, I mean, he has uh, done some brilliant work on this one. I mean, you have all the elements that are required in a thriller like this. It has got the Ruskin Bond edge. He has used his the areas he knows best, Landor, Meerut, where he has stayed for a bit. He has used all the Basuri, of course, but the suspense that he has built up, and this and how a very short story has been converted to a novella is just amazing. The Seven Husbands, of course, if you guys get an opportunity to read this book, the seventh husband is Arun, who of course is in love with Susanna, Priyanka Chopra in the movie, of course. So he is secretly in love with him, but meanwhile, I mean, he's her neighbor, and he's always observing her, and they have a very platonic sort of relationship. But during these 10 to 20 years, he sees six husbands come and go, you know, and being killed, or there are some mysterious deaths which are very the community does thinks that maybe Susanna is a witch or something, but this guy Arun is always in love with her. And of course, I don't want to give spoilers, but the all the short sort of stories are great movies on their own, and great novels on their own. And I'll sometimes I say that maybe Ruskin Bond is way too simplistic for me at this age, but I take those words back. Seriously, this book is just top notch, and I don't think so the success or failure of the movie did this script or screenplay, whatever, the material justice. And it could have better results. I would of course welcome any comments on that. If anybody has read the book or would like to comment on the movie, I haven't watched the movie, but dude, some serious stuff going on in this book, and I'm a bigger Ruskin Bond fan now. All my trepidations about him have gone, and I'm back. I'm a Ruskin Bond fan again. Balu says, I think this Ruskin Bond novel is the equivalent of PG Woodhouse. Which book? Balu, can you come in?
P. Smith, the journalist.
Okay, P. Smith.
Silent.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a different type of genre from P.G. Woodhouse, which I never read in his books, all his 95 books.
Okay, so yeah, Ruskin Bond did a PG Woodhouse on us, but thank you so much, all of you, for sparing time. 1.5 hours just flew by, and thank you so much, the Book Nerds editorial team, everybody present, Shashikant, Swarnim, Bala, Chiranjeev, and others who are in the room. Thank you so much, Neha, for being the technical lead on this one. Thank you so much, and we'll meet perhaps next week or the week after. Thank you so much, guys, and read these. Read these.
Thank you, everyone. It was a great talk.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Nice meeting you.